Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. We have seen a number of videos, proposals of the United States of Africa, Pan-Africanism. Some of our leaders have become obsessed by it. They've forgotten or they're not paying attention to that before you can build a house, you need to think about the building materials. For instance, you can't think of building a multi-story building out of mud bricks. That is the problem. This video here is somebody proposing the United States of Africa. And needless to say, some of our leaders are pursuing it with the same motivation of grandeur and glory for themselves more than anything else.
EU Chairperson H.E. João Lourenço, President of Angola, who holds the position from February 2025 to 2026. He opened the Zoom meeting with one simple message. We are not trying to create a superstate. We are finally creating structure, unity with logic, brotherhood with rules. Beside him sat Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, elected February 2025 from Djibouti. Yusuf presented the legal and institutional blueprint: a rotational presidency, 1 year per country, a unified AU parliament based in South Africa, a council of governors, formerly national presidents, meeting monthly, strict term limits, 2 terms, 5 years each, for every state governor, a continental digital ID, and free trade passport. The vision was powerful. But then the question came, who should go first? That's when Chairman Shadow leaned in and the names began flying. Part 2, the countries mentioned first, democracy benchmarks. According to Chairman Shadow, the first countries mentioned as leading candidates were South Africa, for its strong institutions, judiciary, and media; Botswana, for decades of stable democracy; and Ghana, for peaceful transitions of power and civic engagement; Mauritius, for clean governance and digital leadership. These are the jewels of African democracy, one AU diplomat reportedly said. But then the fire shifted. Someone, believed to be a West African envoy, raised another name. We must also recognize revolutionary leadership. The people's voice must echo in this hall. That's when the name Ibrahim Traoré was dropped. And it didn't just drop, it landed like thunder. Part 3, Traoré, a new symbol of African power. Traoré, the 36-year-old transitional leader of Burkina Faso, has become a symbol of resistance, reform, and redefinition. He took power in 2022 amid political instability, military intervention, and Western influence. But what he did next shocked the AU. He rejected colonial dependency. He called for African unity. He stood with Niger and Mali, creating a new West African alliance, and he won the love of young Africans across the continent.
Well, that is very true. But let's go back to the proposal itself. I think it is right that those who participated did propose that countries like South Africa, Botswana, and Mauritius would form a good potential for this president of the United States of Africa. And they're right. Having a stable political system is important. But if it is rotational, we have got to accept that sooner or later, somebody like Mnangagwa would get into power, would become the president of the United States of Africa. If it is rotational, then you will have to accept that reality. And if you look at Africa's democracy index, you can see that there are very, very few countries that can be considered to be democratic. The rest are not. In this case here, we'll be looking at having those three countries, for instance. So 3 out of 55 years, you'll have what anyone would agree is probably a competent leader, democratic leader. The rest of the time, you're stuck. There's no doubt that a leader like Mnangagwa will be looking at campaigning his term of office, if we accept that it's due to end in 2028. There's nothing you would love more than to be the president of the United States of Africa before he leaves. So if this was to be signed now, you will be campaigning hard to make sure that his name is in the hat. Can you imagine Mnangagwa, president of the United States of Africa? Well, most Zimbabweans out there who know him will tell you, hell no. Bad enough he's president of Zimbabwe. And to be quite honest, he's illegitimate. The AU itself, SADC, election observers, they've all condemned Zimbabwe's 2023 elections as flawed and illegal. But they could not do anything about it because Zimbabweans had participated in those flawed elections in their millions. And yet the continent could find itself stuck with a corrupt and tyrannical dictator for a whole year. I think this whole idea is a distraction. African countries should be concentrating, and the continent as a whole should be focusing on, let's build nations that are democratically stable. That should be the number one priority. Only then can then turn around and build this United States of Africa. Any united nations working together, they have to have some common base. At the present moment, the political and economic and social instability in all the various, in most of the African countries, is such that you do not want that to spread to other countries. So you'll end up with a situation here where, yes, you sign on to this United States of Africa, but every time a dictator comes in as president, the individual nation will be talking of how can we make sure that during the next 12 months, the country is protected from this dictator. Because they would not want their country dragged and reduced to the same failed state as the rest of Africa. We really don't need this idea that we need a United States of Africa for Africa to prosper. Other regions have prospered with the individual countries maintaining their individual identity. The European Union, even then, when they were integrating, they had to integrate only those nations which had shown political stability and the respect of rule of law. Indeed, all the other nations that have been co-opted into the European Union, particularly those that didn't have that history, have found themselves being forced to adapt, to accept democratic values before they could be admitted. In this particular case, are we going to say South Africa, Botswana, Ghana, and Mauritius are going to dictate to the rest of Africa that they should have, for instance, free, fair, and credible elections? Because that is one thing that Zimbabwe has failed to hold. Or are we going to end up with a situation where even those countries that have functioned as democratic nations are overwhelmed by those who have no respect for those democratic values? If I was South Africa, I definitely would not want to be part of a bigger system which is just unstable. This whole idea of a United States of Africa is just a distraction and is typical of African nations to dwell on issues that they cannot accomplish. They just like the idea. They like the idea of a bullet train. And they talk endlessly about a bullet train, forgetting that they do not have a railway network on which that bullet train would run. Zimbabwe's railway system is in such a sorry state that the maximum speed of the trains on even some of the main track is, for the greater part, no more than 40 k's per hour. So why would you want a bullet train that can travel at 200 kilometers per hour when you don't have the track on which it will run. You just like the idea that you've got a bullet train, and you pay over the odds for the privilege of such a facility when you don't need it. I think people should stop this crazy idea of thinking that just because other regions are operating as a united region or bloc, we too must follow suit. The main motivation for some of our leaders is that they just can't wait to be the one holding such an elevated title as president of Africa. And when they failed to be president of Zimbabwe, indeed, some of them do not even qualify to be the headman, given their reputation. I repeat, Africa should concentrate on making the individual nations stable politically and prosperous economically. Only then can Africa start thinking of the United States of Africa. And we should remind our leaders that they should stop wasting time on grant titles like the chairman of SADC, when at home they are the illegitimate president of the country because they rigged the elections. Think about it. Have a good day.